with the applicant, National Highways, to make sure our costs are recovered. So there would have been costs at the examination process. So that's what that's referring to. We would be able to audit that, so I can go and obtain that. In terms of future costs, at the moment, it's been minimal. So it's really been sort of officer time in terms of engagement, maintaining engagement with Lower Thames Crossing staff, which is sensible. I think we will hopefully be in a position to agree that cost recovery agreement fairly soon. But what that does is effectively allocate a cost per hour for sort of our engagement. But it'd be like preliminary work, really, councillor, that National Highways are undertaking. So to a point, it's their risk, because they'll undertake those works at risk that they might not get a decision. But some of it will be if they're trying to access some of our sort of data, there's obviously a cost to get that data, and we want to make sure we can recover that cost. But in terms of quantifying, a little bit difficult, because they don't exactly know what their programme will be, which is why we want to have an agreement in place to make sure we are covered.
Yeah, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. It's to sort of air the general concern that we as councillors, as I say, and it's through successive governments now, are told we have a huge responsibility to be acutely aware of the financial situation of this council. Those of us that sit on scrutiny committees are told by the Centre for Financial Governance that we need to be absolutely on our A game, and we need to know this and we need to go that. And I just find it really hypocritical that the government, through its commissioners, are telling us this is what you've got to do. You've got to be really financially astute. You've got to be aware of all the consequences of decisions A, B and C, whatever they may be. But yet then when it suits them, they just willy-nilly, you know, whether it's civil servants or whether it's politicians, I don't know. But we consistently getting the wrong end of the stick. And I sympathise with you that I asked you a question, how much is it going to cost, which is what the Centre for Financial Governance tells all councillors to ask about all things at this point in time. And you sit there as a planning director and say, I'm sorry, I can't really tell you. And it's just incongruous with what we're being asked to do as a local authority to get back on the right track. And yet again, the government is just stopping us doing that because we don't know. And if you don't know, you can't make decisions and you can't write budgets. You know, I'm not asking you a question, I'm just expounding a point. But the frustration is immense. And, you know, I just hope that somewhere in government, whether it's our MPs or whether it's civil servants who get a whiff of the annoyance, and it may just be me in this committee that's annoyed. But I'm sick to death of being told that you can't have, you know, a new post fixed on the street corner that's annoying all your local residents that really affects their lives, because we haven't got I was going to say a pot to in. But, you know, and then on the other hand, I'm telling people we can't do it because we can't afford it. And then on other aspects, we just hung out to dry. It is so frustrating as a councillor, I tell you.
Yeah, I don't think there was a question to answer. There's more of a statement from Councillor Spate. But he did raise an interesting point in terms of there has been lots of people's lives already have a lot of upheaval due to LTC plans. In terms of some people have sold their houses, others had their houses purchased. Just to name a few, and other people are still dreading it being at the bottom of their garden, and they're not going to get sort of any road consent until the road's actually taking transport up and down it if it ever gets built. I mean, this is probably a good one for you, actually. In terms of our local plan, Councillor Spate mentioned some plan applications. How much does this delay affect the delivery of a local plan?
So there's a report that went to Cabinet on the local plan, and it does reference Lower Thames Crossing. In terms of the decision and the implications, the challenge that the council has with respect to the local plan and Lower Thames Crossing is the understanding of when will growth come forward and where should growth be allocated. And in the absence of clarity around Lower Thames Crossing, the council will have to make a decision in terms of the implications of that. So there is a direct link between the local plan and Lower Thames Crossing, because that will have an impact on when future growth is phased if the council were to decide to potentially allocate land where the crossing is coming forwards. So there is a link. In terms of quantifying it, very difficult, and there's different ways of kind of mitigating that and dealing with that the council may wish to consider. But all I can say is that there is a link, and given that when the report went to Cabinet, I think the decision to delay Lower Thames Crossing announcement sort of came after that was drafted. Ultimately, that there's a timetable that the council are committed to preparing its local plan, and they'll have to, or we will have to, balance that risk and mitigate that risk as that plan moves forward. In terms of how we do that, I can't answer right now, because ultimately that is a decision that council will have to potentially make. All I can say is that officers are working hard to ensure that the evidence base is there to get a sound plan.
Thank you, Ashley. Members, comments or questions for Ashley at all?
I've got one more.
Yeah. Councillor Spate?
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at the whole LTC project ever since its inception. I've been covering it as a journalist, and now involved as a councillor and a member of this task force. And I can see, I'm just utterly baffled as to why the minister decided not to make a decision 2 or 3 weeks ago, given all the hype that had gone into it and where we were and whatever. And I could see, to my mind, only one particular reason why they would have delayed. I mean, it's a straightforward yes or no as far as I can see. The only thing that could be a variable would be the financing of the project. And this may be a question you don't wish to answer. If so, I understand that. But do you get, I've had people connected at Westminster who tell me that there is the possibility of a private finance initiative being a part of this new project. But there's a lot of I's to dot and T's to cross on that before we get to a point, which would explain why they want another 6 months to maybe dot those I's and cross those T's before making it. Do you, and as I say, your remit is planning, and this is finance, so it may be a grossly unfair question, but you're the only one here to ask it of. Do you get any sense at all that there is any possibility that this scheme could become part of a private finance initiative at some point? And it is a colossal amount of money. I don't know how the hell people who were involved would get their money back, because if it's 10 billion quid, they've got to pay up front. That's a heck of a lot of £3.50 crossings over an inordinate amount of years. But nothing surprises me in government anymore. So I just wonder, do you as a professional looking at the field, having a feel of where the government is in its transport strategy and its planning strategy, do you get any sense at all that that might be a possibility?
Okay, for you, Chair, so I'm not really qualified to answer that question. And I don't know if finance colleagues would be able to answer either. But yeah, I can't really sort of provide any intelligence or answer to that. All I can say is that in terms of the task force and the agenda for the task force, you know, if we're tasked to do something and look into something, we obviously will do, and I'll lead that as project lead.
I think that's fair. Councillor Muldowney.
Yeah, I mean, I take Councillor Spate's point, but I mean, if planning permission if there hadn't been a change of government and planning permission the DCO had been granted, the Conservative government had already announced that it was going to delay work on the crossing by 2 years anyway. So, you know, I'm not sure how much this delay is different to the situation that we were in. We've got half the delay. And certainly having been a member of this task force for quite some time now, I would say that those of us that have truly been opposing the crossing, actively been opposing the crossing in its current format, that was our tactic, to delay as much as possible and push the cost-benefit ratio to a point where I mean, I suspect what has happened is that just, you know, that it's going to be very difficult for any government treasury department to agree it, because the costs, which we had National Highways here many times, who would be the ones that we could ask this question of, would never tell us what the true cost of the project was, which of course leads you to suspect that it was considerably more than they'd let out into the public domain. So, you know, I take Councillor Spate's point. I don't really see how we're in any different a situation in terms of our local plan. I just wanted to clarify. I think probably this is a question that you could ask, that you could answer, Ashley. Is there going to be any more costs during this delay period, apart from this, you know, just generally keeping in contact with the Lower Thames Crossing team? But presumably that's going to be minimal. And will we be able to recover those costs?
Yeah, so for you, Chair, so the cost should be minimal because it's engagement and some preliminary works. I'm confident that we can recover them, but it's important that we agree a proper agreement with National Highways, because that's binding on all parties. But I am confident, based on the discussions I've had, that we will be able to recover that.
Thank you, because obviously that is a concern for us as a council. And I mean, Councillor Spate is right that, you know, we've got very strict financial controls in place at the moment, and it is a bit galling if money is being wasted. But I don't, it's reassuring to hear that that isn't the case, and that you're confident that we will be able to recover those costs. Thank you.
So I think Councillor Muldowney raised a really interesting point. We have in the past talked about the delay and the fact that the cost to benefit ratio, but also the cost of the environmental and the carbon, the longer this project is in planning, so to speak, it stacks up against it. So yeah, it is a good point, well made there. And I saw Matt Jackson raise his hand. He's one of our co-opted members. Might be a good time for you to come in there, Matt.
Thank you, Councillor. The board at the front there, it shows 6 red fouls. One of those fouls is the traffic modelling data. I'm wondering if the Chief Officer can expand on the amount of time that's been afforded to traffic modelling within Thurrock, and how the LTC will operate amongst the local roads.
So in terms of quantifying detail, Chair, I can't quantify detail. I mean, everything was presented at the examination. So in terms of the evidence base and the transport evidence, we had experts at the examination hearings, and all that data that we've got should be published and part of the examination library. I don't think I can expand much more upon that unless I've misunderstood the question.
No, I think you answered the question fine. It's just a question of how you then publish that data, because it currently isn't in the public domain, and it's tied up amongst an NDA. So transparency, clarity around that. I think it's fair for the public of Thurrock to understand what they're actually letting themselves in for.
So just to clarify, the data around traffic modelling is not on the examination website whatsoever?
There's some very fine details there, but it doesn't actually allude to the data that potentially isn't in the public domain. Thurrock Council, the planning officers, have access to their own areas' traffic modelling, and each authority where the LTC crosses their boundaries have been signed up to an NDA, which says then only them can then work on that data. And I believe Thurrock has got an NDA with the National Highways, and that data differs from what was in the DCO.
I suppose the question, do we have an NDA with National Highways in regards to traffic data?
I'd have to go back and check, and I'd have to get legal advice. I mean, if the council signed up to an NDA, clearly we can't disclose, you know, what we've agreed not to disclose. But I'm happy to pick that up, Chair, in terms of what the council may or may not have signed up to. But in terms of the examination library, obviously it's an examination in public, but there can be occasions where data is agreed not to be disclosed, but there will be good reasons for that, but that would have been considered by the inspectors at the time. But if you want me to take that away, Chair, I'm happy to do so.
Yes, please, if you could let me know and I can communicate with the rest of the task force, that'd be fantastic. Any other, Mr. Robert Quick.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted you to clarify for me my current understanding. Is there still an opportunity for us to question going ahead with this road, or is that just down now to local MPs and the government? So I'm believing that now the exercise is closed with all the meetings, we have very little opportunity now to put any challenges in. Is that correct, or is there opportunities there that I haven't picked up on?
Okay, for you, Chair. So it's now with government to decide ultimately, so they've reviewed all the evidence. So in terms of us as a council, we've effectively submitted our evidence and we've made our position clear. So in answer to your question, I would say technically the opportunity has gone. That said, those objecting may wish to continue lobbying government, which is a separate matter. And I know that the council's position is one of objection and they have vocalised that. But in terms of actually kind of feeding into the technical process, it's now resting with government.
Because just one aspect of it that I think is in everybody's mind is inaccurate, but is still posted about as the cost of this construction. 10 billion has been quoted for some time now. It must be at least 2 years since that last figure was quoted. Is there any means we have of getting to a more accurate position? Because I think the cost is something that really needs to be weighed up accurately in making this decision, and we don't know what that accurate figure is.
Okay, sure. So for you, Chair, so in terms of the technicalities of process, so my experience of DCOs, NSIPs, which this is, so the route to challenge and query is through that application process. I can't comment on the accuracy of the financials. You know, I'm not representing Lower Thames Crossing. I haven't been appraised of the inaccuracy or accuracy. My view is that ultimately that assessment now sits with the decision maker, which isn't the council. We've obviously set out our position in terms of sort of challenging, and I think the point that you're raising is that the costs are possibly inaccurate. Again, that's really for the decision maker to consider. There's no route at this point that I'm aware of in terms of challenging that through a formal process. Clearly, the parties may wish to lobby and may wish to make requests for information through channels which wouldn't be through ourselves, as you know, we're a consultee as part of the process.
Just before I come over to Councillor Dave, just on Mr. Quick's first point, essentially the DCO have made their recommendation to the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State has to then consider it and then make a decision. There's nothing to stop anyone writing to their MP or to the Secretary of State for Transport to whether they oppose or promote the scheme, to give their own views. So that can still be done. And what we could agree as a task force, that we as a task force write to the Secretary of State for Transport, just to express that don't forget about us in Thurrock and how important it is in impacts of our residents, our quality of air, our green belt, our local plan, our growth plans, and just say, you know, this, I could see some of the things that Matt brought along from Transport Action Network about this is a dinosaur project. Some of the things that we've come up and spoke about is National Highway said, oh, don't worry, we're all going to be in electric cars. And then the date for electric cars was moved. And now that we don't know if that's going to be the answer. There's so many things that have come and gone while this project's been bandied about. It really is not fit for purpose. And in my opinion, should be that we should completely take it off the table and look again with a fresh set of eyes in 2024 in a post-COVID world at something that would actually tick the boxes and get the borough moving and the whole of the South East and the rest of the UK. I don't think this Lower Thames Crossing's it. Councillor Day.
Sorry. Well, mine's more, not so much a question, but carrying on from Robert's chat there and Councillor Spates. I mean, how many projects come in on budget like this? You know, I mean, you look at them, the million, they just don't come in on budget. What private investor would want to bet his money on something? I mean, with the Channel Tunnel, I guess it's different. You can, like Neil said, where I can see where they're going to get the money back. But where they're going to get the money, I mean, all right, there'd be a toll maybe, but it wouldn't come to much, would it? I mean, how many years would it take to get it back? What investor would really want, a private investor, want to take that on? So I think, I don't know if my residents can sleep soundly on this, because this has been, I've been a councillor and gone, I'm now back, and this thing is still going on. It's been forever. It seems like that. And as Councillor Massey has said, you know, it's not fit for purpose. So many things have changed. It needs to be looked at again, and it needs to be somewhere else. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Day. Councillor Siston, then Councillor Spate.
Yeah, just to reply to Councillor Day's point, I think if you look at the Dartford crossing, that is in profit, and maybe that's a bit of the worry that they'll use that argument to private investors, that yes, in time, the profit will come. Well, many years, but
years.
Is that what they're saying if through tolls? Because it hasn't taken the Dartford crossing. No, it's not been open. That the new bridge. Oh, the bridge. Yeah. Yeah, but 2 tunnels preceded that. Yeah. Anyway, you know, we can argue about that, but I think that there may be a case to put that. Not that I'm saying it should be, but that would be the worry. So, and secondly, I'll back up what Councillor Massey said, that it may be useful to put our views across once again as a new council maybe, to the Transport Secretary, and certainly as she's the new Transport Secretary. So yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm happy to get something drafted and circulate with the group so we can all agree it offline before we send it, which might be the quickest, easiest way to get that done. But yes, that sounds like a really good point of action. Just something else of what Councillor Day was saying before I go to Councillor Spate. You mentioned large projects and they never come in budget. Even if you wanted the bedroom extension done 5 years ago, it's going to cost loads more than it. We completely simplified it, but building materials have gone up. There's no two ways about it. And also, you look at things like HS2, which, when you look at LTC, is more expensive per mile than HS2. HS2, luckily, is getting some legs put back on. Not all of them, but some, which I think is a good thing. But in terms of a tunnel, you can't cut legs off of it. You've got to do it all. You can't get halfway and go, oh, we're going to stop, we're not going to go all the way across Thurrock. We're only going to, you know, and that's why this is such a much more dangerous thing to ultimately public or private purses in terms of what if this is done and it happens, they can't do a half job. They have to do it all, and that would be a lot more devastation to our green belt. Councillor Spate.
Yeah, I think one thing that you know, at the end of the day, there are all sorts of machinations that could happen, and we might not be talking. I mean, at the end of the day, if it's a £10 billion project and the government can't afford 10 billion but can afford 5 billion, then he can probably go and look to the other 5 billion from the private sector. So it could be a joint project. So anything is possible, and that's well beyond the sphere of which we can particularly influence from this council. What I'm really concerned about here is the impact on our borough, on our residents, which is something that we're charged with looking after. And, you know, people, we've got coming up, for an example, the plans for a new housing development in East Tilbury, Councillor Massey's patch, which has been put forward for either 850 homes or 1,000 homes, which is due to go to a planning inspectorate hearing because we as a council were so moribund in getting an act together. We didn't, so it's now gone out of our hands back into government hands in a way, which is really, really strange. But again, it's a what if, who does it? Nobody knows. I mean, I don't know anybody can make a judgment. I mean, that extra 150 houses is going to have a significant impact on East Tilbury. And the Section 106 that's going to go along with it, and the requirements for infrastructure that are going to go along. It's chucking two balls up in the air, so we don't know. We've just had a new significant planning application come in for 1,000 homes, albeit it's within an area already marked up on our local plan to the north of Bulfin. What's it called, St Mary, St West Stornville, whatever it is, which again it involves the 128. That's an awful lot of homes that may wish to use the 128. We don't know what's going to happen there, but that's likely to come to a planning committee relatively quickly. One would hope. Sorry.
I'm a bit concerned that we're really straying from the bounds.
Well, I'm going to put a proposal.
Okay.
Sorry. What I'm saying is, we haven't got many definitives. What we've had is, yes, this is a date we're going to make an announcement, and then it's been put back. And then we've had this is going to be an announcement, and then it's been put back. We haven't been told why it's been put back. And I think what is within our remit, we've got organisations like Transport Action Network producing really excellent documents like this that vindicate their argument. What I think we should do, and I'll propose it if you like, and I think we do it, we can't just do it as a round robin and then send it afterwards, we have to do it. I think we should write to the minister concerned, the Transport Minister, and we should say, can you give us an assurance that on whatever day it is, whatever deadline you've set, this will be a definitive answer? Because then we can start to plan. It may be an either or, for example, as with East Tilbury, we may know, but we will have a timeline or whatever. It's really, really, really unfair on residents in Tilbury who don't know whether to buy a house, sell a house, don't know what schools to put their kids into, because we don't know. We've had to delay our own local plan that we haven't had since 2016, an effective local plan. We've now had to put it on ice again for another 2 years, a part of which is down to the lower Thames crossing. Our job is to hold government to account. So I think I would propose that we write to the minister in the terms of which I've just said, can you give a pledge to the people of Thurrock that this is the final delay, that there will be a definitive decision by the end of May 2025, and ask for that. And we'll either get a yes or a no, but if we get a yes, then we might be a little bit further down the road. And there'll be some comfort to people who've got to make plans. I feel sorry for impassioned campaigners within the local campaign group who fought hard against this and thought they'd won and then been kicked in the teeth, and thought they'd won again and been kicked in the teeth. It's about real people. It's not just about bits of tarmac and roads and cars. It's about influence the lives of people in Thurrock. And our job is to look after the lives of people in Thurrock, so we should bring pressure to bear on the minister's desk. And I would propose that that's what we write to the minister for and ask her to do it.
Just to sum up there, in case it didn't make sense, the one that I know about, when we talked about the East Tilbury plan application, there is an option A and option B, whether Lower Thames Crossing goes ahead, which is why Councillor Spate mentioned it, because it is directly impacted by Lower Thames Crossing. I do take Councillor, we're not talking about planning, it's sometimes just traffic and what we're going to build where. Councillor Spates made a proposal. Councillor Fox has also just entered the chamber, so he probably doesn't know what the proposal was. To sum it up, and I'm sure Councillor Spate will correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Spate was suggesting if we write to the Secretary of State for Transport, we ensure that there is no further delay after this proposed May 2025 delay. I'd like to open up for discussion.
And the reason for that being the well-being of the people of Thurrock.
Any member?
I can't see
Councillor
what
Day.
harm that would do. I mean, you might get a no. They can't give you the exact answer. And if, as you say, Councillor Spate, if they say yes, that's great. It's worth a chance. It's worth. I'd back you for it. I'd second it for you.
Councillor Muldoon?
I think I'm just not quite sure about the governance, because we're a committee that still reports into general services. I think you might, as chair, you might need to check. I know that previously we have written to National Highways, haven't we, on all sorts of matters. So I think you would just probably need to check in with Dem Services about whether we do that, or whether we have to go to General Services Committee to ask them to do that. I think this is a difficult meeting tonight, because we're talking a lot. There's a lot of speculation. We've got Ashley here, but obviously he's not in a position to answer any of these questions, because it's not anything that falls within his remit. We've got quite a long way away from actually talking to the report. I think we need to check governance-wise what we're actually constituted to do as a task force, because we have a particular position. I'm not opposed to writing to anybody, but I just think we need to stick to the report that's actually in front of us, and we need to probably, Chair, you probably need to check with governance about how you would go about doing that, if that's what the task force decides it wants to do.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Spate?
Yeah, I mean, we are a recognised, let's just say, well, you're quite right, Councillor Muldowney. It would probably have to come from Cabinet, not General Services, I think, because at the end of the day, that's the executive of this council. And I can't see, if we, as a task force, ask Cabinet to support our view that we show this evening, that we would like that letter going, because we are, as a council, an official consultee. And I go back to, you know, there was a school of thought that said, let's cancel this meeting tonight, which would have been, I think, the third time this meeting, because there isn't a huge amount to talk about, except the angst and annoyance that we probably all feel. And I think we have an obligation to residents that we sit here as elected councillors, not just to say, well, we're not going to have a meeting and we're not going to talk about it because we can't do something. The very least we can do, and possibly all that we can do, is to say that we are absolutely sick to the back teeth of being messed about in this borough. And I go back to that. So I don't think it's unreasonable to take what I've just said and send it as a recommendation from this task force, this committee, whatever you want to call it, to Cabinet, asking this council to write to the government minister, what's her name? Louise Haigh, write to Louise Haigh and say, can you give us some comfort that the end is finally in sight? Because we've had this for more than a decade now, and quite frankly, the people of Thurrock are fed up with it.
I think there, through discussion, we've come to what would be more agreeable to the task force. So that's good. Matt Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. Just to kind of address what Neil has said there, a couple of weeks ago we had an open drop-in session in Westminster in Portcullis House that MP Jen Craft had arranged, which was really good. I think you would have backing of Jen Craft if you were to write to the Minister, and maybe, may I suggest that you also include Dr Laura Sullivan, who is the Gravesham MP, who shares our common belief that the LTC isn't fit for purpose. She also dropped in during that session and was very pro our cause. So I think there's an opportunity and a mechanism for you to engage with the MPs and attack it that way via the Minister.
Yep, completely agree. Councillor Muldowney?
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of Laura, who obviously was your predecessor on the committee, would always say that, you know, we're stronger when we work together, and we shouldn't presuppose that that we're in opposition to the government or our MPs. We should be working together in order to get this through. It's just I'm not quite sure from a governance point of view, because we are now in this delay, which, as I said before, we would have been anyway, no matter what. Well, I mean, I suppose if the DCO had have been refused, then we wouldn't have been in limbo. But if it had have been approved, the Conservative government had already said it was going to delay building by 2 years anyway. And we suspect that's because of the expense of the crossing. The Treasury wasn't prepared to sign it off. Seems the most likely explanation for that. But again, it's all speculation. But yes, I agree that we should be working with our elected members. Now that we've got elected members who are actually sympathetic to our cause, and using those channels in a collegiate way, I think we're probably going to get more done in that way than in some kind of to be looking at it as if we're in some kind of fight with government. Because the delay at the moment, as I understand it, is so that it can be reviewed. You know, so there is a whole review of all the transport programmes that were undertaken by the previous government, which I'm very pleased with, personally, and I think it is the right thing to do, especially with all the issues that we've got. We know we shouldn't be building more roads. You know, I've always had a problem with the Lower Thames crossing in that it's not multimodal. You know, it's just a road. I could never understand why that was the original plan. You know, we do have problems at the Dartford crossing, but we do think we've always thought that this is the wrong place to have another crossing if there does have to be another crossing. My hope is that during this delay period, what we will see from the government is a prioritisation of public transport and other ways of moving, particularly freight around the country, which we've already seen with the ports. They've been working with Network Rail and with the Port of Southampton to they're going to get 10,000 trucks off the road. So my hope has been with this that this delay is a good thing, personally, from my point of view. This is a good thing for Thurrock, because it gives time for these kind of other initiatives to build momentum. As far as I can see so far with the decisions that have been made, and obviously, you know, I haven't got a direct line from national government, so please don't take this as my word. This is just my assumptions from looking at what's been happening, is that they're not prioritising projects like this that are not green, that are not multimodal, you know, that are not going to get freight off the roads and onto rail or sea or you know, other better forms of transport. The direction seems to be towards a different way. So personally, I think the delay is positive rather than negative. I think it's more positive than negative. Yes, we've still got uncertainty, but we would have had that uncertainty anyway. We know that because there would have already been a delay. And personally, sort of having sat on this committee for, I don't know, this is my 6th year, I believe that our strategy that we've had, we got the first DCO kicked out, you know, and a lot of us worked very hard to get residents engaged with those consultation processes and get that, you know, kicked out. And I actually believe that we've been successful in that strategy. And we were told in those days that we would have no chance of opposing this crossing. We were told we might as well just try and get as much out of it as possible. But there was a group of us that were determined that we weren't going to do that. And we actually, you know, we hit the ground and we talked to residents and we got them engaged in consultation. We did manage to get that first DCO kicked out. And then we've managed to get this delay to a point where there is still hope that we can prevent this crossing blighting our, you know, local area and causing massive disruptions for our businesses, for our local residents. And, you know, my personal opinion is that I don't think we should be building any more roads. We certainly shouldn't be building roads that are just roads. It should be at least multimodal, because if we want to have a world for future generations, we need to be shifting that policy. We need to be shifting people away from their cars and onto greener forms of transport. So, and I hope that is the direction that we are starting to go in. Those are the indications as far as I've seen. But yes, I think we should engage. We should engage with our MP, and we should. I'm quite happy to back a letter to the Secretary of State for Transport, but I don't think it should be presupposed that we're in opposition to them. You know, this is a review period.
I think with that in mind, we also need to be cautious about the private-public financing of this. If that model does change, going back to 2013 when this project was first tabled as a potential private project, it was thrown out because it just didn't make financial sense to anybody that was involved. So taking that back to now, we've had the highest level of inflation since the last time the LTC was costed at 9 billion. You could be looking at maybe 14 billion, if not more. So we need to understand what that cost model is and how that will pay out and what that might mean for residents, because if tolling is increased to pay back that cost, what might that impact be for locals? With £1 billion worth of investment at DP World, we also need to be mindful of our transport plan. What's happening there with our transport plan? It sounds good from what DP World are talking about with their transportation projection, using more rail. They've got a lot of work to do to achieve that. They've got to increase the gauge of their connection between Southampton and DP World in Thurrock. There's also another project which looks at Ashford to Reading as an alternative. So that again needs gauge improvement. There's lots of projects which could mitigate the need for the Lower Thames crossing, but if we just focus on Thurrock for now, having that transport plan in place, it's going to mean a lot, because you've got robust detail that Thurrock hold that could share with the government to highlight the problems, and the same for Dartford or Kent County Council, to explain all of those problems, because I don't think they fully appreciate that every freight train could carry between 80 and 129 HGVs each train. And as you alluded to earlier, that's significant. Means that maybe that the LTC project is a dinosaur project, and there's an opportunity for us to look at those alternatives, which are far greener and far cheaper. So it makes financial sense to actually critique that and go back to the Transport Minister. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of good points there, well made. Councillor Spate?
Yeah, just briefly, I think part of the problem is, and Matt touched on it, and Sarah in her usual erudite way touched on it as well. I think the big frustration is, and the big problem that we've got here, is that we don't know, and we've just not been given the answers. And since Sarah's become a councillor, she's won the respect of a great many people, now holds a portfolio holder for resources. I know that Councillor Muldowney would not make a significant decision that affected residents in this borough, or residents in her ward, if you want to take it down that way, without an explanation as to why. And you would share that explanation. Whether people agreed with it or not is almost irrelevant, but you would come up with a reason why you're doing things. What frustrates me is we're not getting reasons. You know, this minister, Louise Haigh, you know, who put a foot in it with DP World, big time. So we know that, you know, a veracity of judgment is not everything that it should be, but literally sat in her office and said, Everybody was geared up. We were doing interviews on local radio. Local councillors were getting run up. Big decision on Friday. On the Friday morning that the decision was due, I was on BBC Essex talking about it. You know, and then literally, cut, gone, underneath. And she just doesn't say why. I'm just taking my bat and ball home and I'm not going to tell you why, and we're going to go again in May. That is, it must, for somebody yourself, a planning officer, must be horrendously difficult. So I think the more pressure we put on for the government, it's irrelevant what colour the government is, for the government and the civil service that are working the strings behind it, to just give us more information. And by putting pressure and by putting a letter on the minister's desk, asking for information, asking for clarification, I think it's not unreasonable at all for us to do that. And it's about all we can do. You know, we've got, I mean, it's interesting, Matt just talked about trains. We've just talked about trains. I don't know if anybody's been following social media today, but there's a big issue in Tilbury that's arising now. Tilbury have stepped up through their Freightliner service to Manchester. They're now doing 7 services a week and looking to expand it as well. What's that meant is we've got trains with 70 to 80 containers going through Tilbury, and it's not a great railway line. And when you go around some corners, they squeak and whatever. So you're now getting residents who had not that many trains coming from Tilbury 2, which is now they're coming from Tilbury 2, going through residential areas of Tilbury, and people are now saying, hang on, the noise levels have gone up inordinately because you've now got more freight trains. And we all think more freight trains is a great thing, despite the fact that they're driven by diesel engines, you know. But so we haven't got a strategy that's really multimodal in terms of methods of getting from A to B to C. And until we start to get some honesty and direction, planners can't plan. All we want is honesty. That's all I want to say. I may disagree with it. You know, sorry, I'm a bit passionate about transport. I've just spent 4 days in Northern Europe going around on trams. There's another one for Thurrock. You know, we've got a tram project in its infancy we should be embracing, and this council's completely ignored it. You know, travelling around Hamburg, travelling down Rotterdam, travelling around Zeebrugge, big industrial areas on a fantastic transport infrastructure, which we haven't got in this country. It drives me mad. Sorry, that's rant over.
Thank you, Councillor Spate. Holiday plans there. Yeah. Any other comments or questions before we close the meeting from anyone? We've got a vote in a second.
Yes. So as I understand it, the task force will have to report into its appropriate executive committee. So I think from what I've heard, obviously you've received the report, which is effectively an update. So there's no technical recommendations as part of that. But I think effectively from what I've heard is a request for the task force to prepare a letter, or the cabinet to prepare, council to prepare a letter, setting out its concerns and the points articulated. So what I think would happen then is that would go to the appropriate executive committee, which we will take back if that's what the task force are looking for. Does that make sense, Chair?
Yeah, whether it's general services or cabinet, wherever it needs to go, a letter as of the task force, just giving our views and hopefully wherever the executive takes that on and passes it on to the Transport Secretary. I think that's the way I understand it. Yeah. So yeah, we can. Councillor System. And
would we look for combining with the MP over that, or would it be a separate letter just from this group?
I think we can all write to the MPs as individuals, as residents, businesses, councillors. But if we just keep this direct from this group to the Transport Secretary via whatever executive group it needs to go through.
Yeah, exactly, Chair. So I think the recommendation, it's not my recommendation, it's the task force, would be to go to the executive committee for them to then issue the letter. But from what I'm hearing, the task force want the council to issue this letter, and you can sort of prepare that and we can assist as appropriate. But that's what I'm hearing, Chair. So in terms of trying to sort of move that forward, if that is agreed, you know, if the task force are in agreement, then I'm used to sort of planning committee, but you know, you'd normally vote on that as agreement, and then that would go to the appropriate executive committee to consider.
Thank you. So in terms of recommendation is the task force's concerns and views are taken to whatever executive committee is responsible, and would ask that committee to write on behalf of the task force to the Transport Secretary of State, in sharing our views and concerns around timelines and ensuring the residents of Thurrock are still at the foremost of the thoughts when this project is considered. Does that sound fair? Would anyone like to tweak it?
As the somebody who proposed it, I'm happy for the for Ashley and the Democratic Services team and yourself to draft an appropriate letter and delegate you the authority then to submit it to Cabinet or General Services for their response. I mean, all you need to do is copy everybody around it. If anybody's got any big objections, I'm sure they would let you know. It can be done fairly quickly, and we can bounce it to our own executive, who can make a decision, and then send it on to the Minister and just see what happens.
Is that all agreed? Any against? Right, thank you very much. Is that enough there for you, Ashley, in terms of, I know planning's a different thing, but you're trying to encompass everything there. Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. That concludes the business of the meeting this evening, and I'd now like to declare the meeting closed at 7:01